Is this some kind of joke? The words cut through the heat, sharp and dripping with the arrogance of youth. Corporal Evans stood at the edge of the Mojave firing range, his uniform crisp, his stance squared, and his pride louder than his rank. The desert sun hammered down, blurring the horizon into waves of silver light. His hand gestured toward the bench at the far end of the line, and the man sitting behind it, Alan Palmer, did not move. 82 years had carved deep lines around his eyes and hollowed the strength of his frame, but not his composure. His breathing was slow, deliberate, the way a man inhales before a storm. The rifle resting across his lap was an oddity, a brilliant matte orange that burned against the sea of black and tan military hardware surrounding it. A few Marines nearby stifled laughter. One whispered, "Is that a paintball gun?" Another chuckled, "Maybe he hunts traffic cones." Their humor bounced easily across the range, carried on the dry wind. Evans stepped closer, his boots crunching against gravel. "Sir, this is an active training range. You cannot just walk in here with whatever that is." Palmer lifted his gaze slowly. His eyes were clear and steady, the pale blue of old glass. "I was told the range was open," he said quietly. Evans scoffed. "Open to Marines, not tourists with toy rifles." The laughter grew louder. Even Gunnery Sergeant Blake, standing nearby with folded arms, allowed himself a thin smirk before turning serious again. He had been informed a civilian observer might attend today's session, but he had not expected this. A frail veteran with a rifle the color of a warning sign. Palmer rose to his feet, slow but upright. The desert wind tugged at his cap, revealing a shock of silver hair. His voice did not rise, yet every syllable carried. "Sergeant," he said evenly, addressing Blake, "I would like to request the far bench." 5,000 meters. The range went silent. One Marine laughed nervously. 5,000? "Sir, our targets max out at 3. Palmer adjusted the sling on his shoulder. "Then set one further." Blake frowned. "You understand what you are asking for? That distance is a matter of wind, patience, and faith," Palmer interrupted. "Nothing more." Evans shook his head, muttering something under his breath about wasted time. Blake hesitated, studying the old man's expression. Calm, unshaken, anchored by something unseen. Finally, with a half-smile, he said, "All right, old-timer, take your shot. Let's see what that orange toy can do." The Marines chuckled again, some pulling out phones to record the spectacle. Palmer walked toward the end of the range, each step quiet, measured. When he reached the final bench, he knelt in the dust, unwrapped a small cloth from the rifle's barrel, and whispered something no one could hear. The laughter faded as the wind rose, carrying his words into the desert silence. The desert wind had shifted. It hissed across the range like a whisper from the past, carrying dust that shimmered in the sunlight. The laughter of moments ago had thinned into uneasy curiosity. Alan Palmer's orange rifle rested on the bench before him, its color vivid against the beige sprawl of the Mojave. The Marines who had mocked him now gathered behind, drawn not by respect, but by the quiet gravity surrounding him. Gunnery Sergeant Blake stepped forward, crouching beside the old man with a half-smile. "Mind if I take a look?" Palmer nodded once. Blake reached for the rifle, expecting a novelty, some outdated hunting piece or a ceremonial relic. But as his fingers brushed the metal, he paused. The rifle's frame was cold, balanced, heavier than it appeared. Custom machine parts, handmade mounts, no factory stamp. Every screw and weld spoke of personal craft, not mass production. The stock bore faint etchings, names, dates, coordinates, carved so delicately they looked like shadows beneath the orange paint. Blake's brow furrowed. "This thing is antique," he muttered. "Pre-digital. No laser rangefinder, no smart optic." Palmer's voice was soft. "She is older than you, Sergeant. But older things often remember what the new ones forget." Blake looked up, uncertain whether to laugh or listen. "And what is that, sir?" "Patience," Palmer said simply. Behind them, Corporal Evans crossed his arms, unimpressed. "Patience doesn't hit steel at 5,000 meters, old man. Computers do." Palmer gave no reply. He adjusted the rifle's bipod, brushing dust from the barrel. His hands, though aged, moved with a mechanic's precision, tightening, aligning, correcting. There was rhythm in every gesture, a ritual learned through repetition and necessity. The Marines around him shifted, exchanging whispers. He's really going for it. He must be insane, or he's just bored and wants a story to tell. Palmer ignored them. He opened a small metal case, revealing hand-loaded rounds, each polished to mirror brightness. On their brass casings, faint letters were scratched by hand, initials. Blake leaned closer to read one. J.R. Friends, Palmer said without looking up. Each one fired beside me once. A silence settled again, heavier this time. The desert wind dropped for a moment, leaving only the faint click of his tools and the steady pulse of his breathing. He lifted a small weather gauge, an old analog anemometer, and set it in the sand. Its spinning cups caught the air, the needle dancing on the dial. No electronic readouts, no data feed, just wind and instinct. Evans scoffed. You really think that antique gear's going to read the drift right? Palmer glanced at him once. I do not need it to read right. I only need it to remind me how wrong men can be. The corporal's smirk faltered. Palmer returned to his rifle, eye pressed to the scope, fingers still. The light shifted, painting him in gold and shadow. Around him, the range had gone silent, not from respect yet, but from the slow unraveling of disbelief. The orange rifle no longer looked ridiculous. It looked alive, and for the first time, Gunnery Sergeant Blake could not tell if the old man was a fool or the most dangerous shot he had ever met. The afternoon sun had turned cruel. The air rippled with heat, mirage lines dancing like ghosts above the dunes. The Marines gathered closer, their mockery now subdued into restless anticipation. Every rifle on the line lay silent, every conversation cut short. All eyes fixed on the old man and his orange rifle. Gunnery Sergeant Blake folded his arms, watching Palmer adjust the scope. 5,000 meters, he said quietly, half to himself. That's over 3 miles. You sure you want to waste your last good round on that distance? Palmer did not look up. I do not waste bullets. Sergeant. A few Marines snickered again, but softer this time, as if unsure whether to laugh or hold their breath. Blake gave a small nod to Corporal Evans. Fine, let's give him his target. Plate number 76, the farthest one. You will need a telescope to see it. Evans smirked and raised his binoculars, scanning the barren expanse until he found it. A dull steel plate at the very edge of the range, so distant it shimmered like a mirage. There, 5,000 on the dot. Blake turned back to Palmer. Hit that, and I will personally call the base general myself. The veteran finally smiled, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. Then I hope your radio still works. He lay prone on the bench, pressing the rifle into the sandbag. The orange barrel gleamed against the earth. The Marines formed a half-circle around him, phones raised, cameras rolling. The desert wind fell into a hush. Palmer's breathing slowed. He adjusted the dials by feel, his fingers moving with the calm grace of habit. He lifted his weather gauge once more, reading the air with his eyes instead of instruments. He spoke softly, almost to himself. Southwest wind, 12 knots. Temperature rise, mirage shift at 40 seconds. It will drift right by 3 feet, Evans frowned. He's guessing. Blake shook his head. No, he's calculating. Palmer pulled the bolt back, slid in a single round, and closed it with a quiet click. The sound was final, a punctuation mark in the stillness. Through his scope, the world narrowed. The distant plate blurred behind waves of heat. It was nearly invisible, swallowed by distance and distortion. But Palmer's focus was absolute. The breath he drew was measured, deep, steady. The silence stretched. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then the trigger broke. The rifle thundered, the sound rolling across the desert like a breaking wave. The recoil barely moved him. The round disappeared into the horizon, leaving nothing but stillness in its wake. 1 second, 2, 3, then faintly, a metallic ping carried across miles of open air. Evans froze. Blake's eyes widened. The farthest plate, barely visible through binoculars, swayed gently in the desert wind. No one spoke. The Marines stood motionless, disbelief etched into every face. Palmer exhaled, calm and unshaken, and began to reload. "Wind just shifted," he murmured. "Might as well make it two." And for the first time all day, no one laughed. The echo of that impossible ping lingered across the Mojave like the ghost of artillery fire. The silence afterward was deafening. Even the desert seemed to hold its breath. Corporal Evans lowered his binoculars, his mouth half open. "No way," he whispered. That had to be luck." Palmer did not answer. He was already adjusting his wind dial again, calm as a surgeon. He fired a second round. The crack of the rifle split the air, followed after an eternity by another faint metallic ping. 2 for 2. Blake exhaled, muttering a wordless sound that fell somewhere between disbelief and awe. Around him, every Marine stood motionless, the laughter long gone. The desert, once filled with swagger, now felt sacred, a place where something unseen had just been proven true. Evans' radio crackled at his side. The sound startled him. Blake snatched it from his belt. "Command, this is range control," a voice said. "We are reading 2 confirmed impacts on target plate 76. Is that correct?" Blake hesitated. "Affirmative," he replied slowly. "And you might want to send someone down here." The voice on the other end paused. "Someone already is." Minutes later, the distant hum of engines grew louder. A small convoy of vehicles approached from the north perimeter, kicking up dust plumes that shimmered in the sunlight. The Marines straightened instinctively. When the lead Humvee stopped, the door opened, and a figure stepped out, full dress uniform, silver stars glinting in the heat. General Whitaker. Even the air seemed to tighten around his presence. Blake snapped to attention, saluting sharply. "Sir, range secure." The general's eyes swept the firing line, pausing when they fell upon the old man and his orange rifle. "So," he said quietly, "this is the marksman who has everyone talking." Palmer turned his head slightly, acknowledging him with a nod but no salute. "Afternoon, General." Whitaker walked closer, his boots crunching in the dust. He stopped a few feet away, studying the rifle, then the man. His expression softened, disbelief giving way to recognition. "I know that face," he said after a moment. "You are Alan Palmer." Blake glanced between them. "You know him, sir?" The general nodded slowly. "I should. My father told me about him." His eyes never left Palmer. "He was the spotter at Khe Sanh, the one who took the ridge gun with a single shot at 2 miles. Saved half a company that day." The Marines around them shifted uneasily. The orange rifle, the joke, the spectacle, suddenly looked like history itself. Whitaker's voice grew quieter. "That rifle was painted orange back then too, was it not? Something about a call sign?" Palmer's gaze drifted toward the horizon. "Orange Fox," he said softly. "My spotter. He never made it home." The general removed his cap and stood in silence. Then slowly he saluted. One by one, every Marine on the line followed. The laughter of the morning had turned into reverence. Blake swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the old man. "Sir," he said quietly, "I think we owe you more than an apology." Palmer shook his head. "No, Sergeant. You owe your country the same thing I did, your best shot." The general lowered his hand, a faint smile beneath the weight of memory. "And you just reminded every one of them what that means." The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows that stretched across the firing line. The once scorching light softened to amber, painting everything, rifles, helmets, faces, in quiet gold. The Marines remained gathered, still digesting what they had witnessed. The old man, the rifle, the impossible shots, it had all rewritten the laws of pride and precision before their eyes. Palmer sat on the bench again, carefully cleaning the rifle's barrel with slow, reverent motions. Each stroke of the cloth felt like a ritual, as if the weapon itself carried the memory of those who once stood beside it. The orange paint caught the dying light, glowing like a fading flame. Gunnery Sergeant Blake approached, his voice subdued. "Sir, may I ask something?" Palmer looked up. "Of course. That color," Blake said, nodding at the rifle. "Why orange?" "I thought maybe it was just to stand out, but now I feel like there's a story." Palmer paused. His hands stopped moving. For a long moment he stared at the rifle, as if seeing it for the first time. "There is," he said finally. He set the rifle down gently and looked at the ring of young Marines gathered nearby. They listened without command now, not as soldiers to a superior, but as students to a living history. "She was not always orange," Palmer began. "Back in '68 she was dull steel and worn walnut. My spotter, Lieutenant James Rowe, called her Foxfire because even under moonlight she'd glint like she carried her own flame. His call sign was Orange Fox. The color came later, after he didn't. The words carried a stillness that stilled even the wind." Palmer's voice did not shake, but every syllable trembled with memory. "He and I were on the ridge during Khe-Sanh. Heavy shelling. Noise so constant you stopped hearing it. We had orders to take out an enemy emplacement that had our men pinned. The shot was impossible. Wind, dust, heat, everything wrong. But Rowe trusted the math. He trusted me." He drew a slow breath. "We made the shot. The ridge gun went silent, but minutes later, mortars found our position. I made it out. He didn't. The Marines stood silent, the weight of his words sinking into them like sand taking in rain. When I came home," Palmer continued, "I could not look at this rifle without remembering him. So I painted it orange, his color. Every time I take aim, I remember who steadied my hands. The color reminds me that no matter how far the shot, you never take it alone." Evans, the young corporal who had mocked him first, swallowed hard. "Sir," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for everything I said earlier." Palmer gave him a faint smile. "Do not be sorry, son. Arrogance is just inexperience with louder boots." Even Blake smiled at that. Palmer stood, the rifle gleaming softly in the evening light. "Respect is not earned through rank or age," he said. "It is earned through patience, discipline, and the courage to learn, even when you think you already know." The men nodded, each word etching itself into the silence. The orange rifle no longer looked strange. It looked sacred. The Mojave night came fast, wrapping the range in a cool hush, broken only by the soft hum of distant generators. Most of the Marines had gone silent, some still standing at their posts, others seated on the dry earth, staring downrange where the last rays of sun kissed the steel targets. Alan Palmer remained at the farthest bench, the orange rifle resting across his knees like an old friend. Gunnery Sergeant Blake approached once more, his voice low but firm. "Sir, command has been notified. They want confirmation on that range reading. 5,000 meters exactly?" Palmer smiled faintly. 5,004 to be exact. Blake shook his head in disbelief. "No Marine on record has ever hit that distance with a man-portable rifle. I think you just made history." Palmer's gaze drifted beyond the targets, past the dunes, past the horizon. "History is written by those who remember, Sergeant. I just came here to remind a few." Blake nodded, silent. Behind him, Corporal Evans stepped forward, his earlier arrogance now replaced with something quieter. Respect. "Sir, permission to shake your hand." Palmer rose slowly, his movements deliberate and heavy with age. He took Evans' hand, firm and steady. "You've got good eyes, Corporal. Just need to learn to see a little further than the scope." Evans managed a small, embarrassed grin. "Yes, sir." The night deepened. A soft wind rolled over the desert, carrying with it the faint echoes of the day's laughter. Laughter now replaced by reverence. The orange rifle gleamed under the dim lights of the range. Almost alive with memory, a jeep pulled up near the benches. From it stepped a man in a crisp uniform, a general, his medals catching the faint light. He walked straight toward Palmer, his face unreadable. The Marines snapped to attention. "At ease," the general said quietly. He looked at Palmer with something between disbelief and awe. "Mr. Palmer, I reviewed the data feed. That shot, it was beyond extraordinary." "I thought it was impossible." Palmer's voice was calm. "With all due respect, General, impossible is just what men call things they have not tried enough times." The general nodded slowly. "You've done more than hit a target today, sir. You've reminded this corps what patience, calculation, and legacy really mean." Palmer glanced at the rifle once more. It wasn't just me, General. Foxfire still burns. The General extended his hand. On behalf of the United States Marine Corps, thank you for your service, then and now. Palmer hesitated, then returned the handshake. You don't thank a Marine, General. You just make sure the next one carries the torch. The General smiled. Consider it done. As the jeep pulled away and the Marines slowly dispersed, Palmer stood alone at the bench. The desert wind tugged gently at his faded cap. He looked out into the darkness where his bullet had vanished and whispered, "For you." Roo! A soft tear rolled down his cheek. He shouldered the orange rifle one last time, the color glowing faintly in the moonlight, a beacon of memory, courage and faith. The camera would pull back now, rising slowly, capturing the vast silence of the Mojave under starlight. A single line fades in across the screen. Respect is not in the uniform you wear, but in the legacy you leave behind. Fade to black.